All right, we are ready to talk F1 on Mystery Caution, our new motorsports channel. And I'm Greg DePalma, but I'm not the one that is hosting F1. It's this guy, CJ Radoon. And CJ, we are starting our coverage of F1 on Mystery Caution. And I wanted to be here to kind of open things up with you and kind of just get things rolling along here for you, because it's going to be hopefully a much more exciting season than 2023, unless you're a Max Verstappen fan.
Well, yeah, we'll have to see. So, cars getting ready to hit the track, getting ready for a record season, 24 total races, longest season schedule in Formula One history. Testing just completed at Bahrain last weekend. They're going to be at Bahrain to open the season this weekend. So everything gets underway a day earlier than expected. Usually we have practice on Friday and then the race on Sunday, but they're practicing on Thursday. The race is actually going to be Saturday morning here on the East Coast of the United States. But everybody who is an F1 fan is more than ready to get the season underway.
Well, starting next week, we are going to introduce some additional graphics. So we'll have some more stats that we'll bring to the table, sort of similar to what you guys can see on our NASCAR coverage. And you could probably we'll have a link in the description of this video where you can check out the preview for the NASCAR race this week. And I think it just makes it a lot easier, especially for one-on-one when you got a host, and instead of having a couple of, like when Eric and I used to do the show together, a lot easier for us to banter back and forth. But the viewers seem to like it, and it just gives them some more information that we can provide for them for each driver and each track. Before I let you kick off for the season, CJ, I do have to ask you about Max Verstappen, and I have to ask this question, and that is, because I hear this question asked at other times in sports, especially when somebody's dominating the sport. Is Max Verstappen right now bigger than F1?
No. No. Hands down, no. Max Verstappen can go. He can stay. F1's going to persist. F1 has persisted. We've had names like Senna, Prost, Mansell, Schumacher, Hamilton. Take your pick. Drivers come and go. Teams come and go. The series is what has endured it, and it has endured since the 50s. And it is, and always has been, and will remain so, the pinnacle of motorsport. Everybody wants to get there. Everybody wants to be the Formula One world champion. More recently, it's been more about the car probably than the driver, and a lot of luck of getting into the right car at the right time. Clearly, you have to have the skill to be able to get into Formula One. That being said, though, the fact that the teams design and build their own cars to their interpretation of the rules each and every season is what makes Formula One so unique. They push the envelope in everything you can possibly imagine within legality, sometimes without legality. And it's really a team sport. So we talk about in NASCAR it being a team sport in terms of mistakes on pit road. Certainly, development of the car throughout the season in Formula One is crucial, and the ability to design and deliver right from the get-go a very quick car using the same rule book as everybody else is what makes the difference. And Red Bull has clearly had that ability over the last 3 seasons. Mercedes had that before them with Lewis Hamilton, and before that it was take your pick. Mika Hakkinen did 2 championships in a row. Michael Schumacher had several in a row. It goes on and on. So Max Verstappen, here or not, Formula One will endure. He is not bigger than the sport.
Tennis, I used it back in the day, and I think it's still not as much today, because those great players, I don't know, they seem to be getting now older, the Novak Djokovic's of the world and so forth. But there's always, it seemed like ever since the McEnroes and the Connors and the Borgs kind of retired, and then you went to Sampras and so on. I don't think anybody here understands what I'm talking about on F1. Well, maybe they do, because it's a world sport, tennis as well. But the point I'm getting to is that you would have these periods where it always seemed like somebody was dominating. It just never seemed like you had 2 or 3 or 4 that could split the 4 majors because they were all equally good. Is that the case with F1?
It seems to be, certainly. So it was Michael Schumacher against Mika Hakkinen for a while. It was Fernando Alonso for a bit, and then Lewis Hamilton as well. Max Verstappen and Hamilton more recently. And quite honestly, that's exactly what we saw last year as well. So, despite the fact that Sergio Perez finished second in the championship, he won 2 races. Right behind them was Lewis Hamilton, and he actually segregated himself from Alonso and Leclerc, who ended up tying on the championship standings. So that rivalry, that those two, like you referenced in golf and in tennis, right now those are Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, and it's going to be interesting. We touched on it on the preview show with Hamilton's future being at Ferrari, this being his last year with Mercedes. It's going to be interesting to see, number one, how the Ferrari, I'll get into this more later, but it's going to be interesting this year to see how quick that Ferrari car is in preparation for Hamilton to come in. And then you'll really get a true feel for, what Hamilton is able to do with a completely different team. Michael Schumacher came to Ferrari after winning 2 championships and lifted them up to a further several, 5, I want to say, and then in a row. Just dominated the sport, but they were at the low of the low at the time that he came in, and he was able to successfully turn them around. Ferrari is not there now, so it's going to be interesting. But they're also not Mercedes. They haven't been Mercedes, and they haven't been Red Bull over the past couple of seasons. So it's going to be interesting to see what Lewis Hamilton's able to do with that. But yeah, right now the rivalry chiefly is going to be between Verstappen and Hamilton, possibly Leclerc, depending on how well Ferrari unloads this year.
Do we have like I know we do, but with the historical figures, do they actually like? Is it more often than not that one driver will have like an average number of victories more than the second driver who has the? So in other words, like, how many races are there a year?
Well, this year there are 24, so the schedule keeps changing. Way back in the day, it used to be a set 16 every year, so you'd be able to really compare from season to season. Like, so and so got 9 victories out of 16. The highest before that was 7. Last year, Verstappen lost 3 total races out of 22. 23 were scheduled. 1 was canceled.
Was that a record percentage wise?
That is a record. Yeah. So you've got to start comparing percentages. But I would say we haven't seen a truly competitive season, I would say, since Verstappen and Hamilton had that famous last race battle at Abu Dhabi, the year that Verstappen nicked his first championship. He's now gone on to win 3 straight after last year. But that first championship that he won when he was really working hard to chase down Hamilton at that time, and it all came down to that last race, I would say that was probably the last truly competitive season that we've had since Red Bull and Verstappen firmly took hold of destiny.
Yeah, well, that's what the sport. Look, everybody knows parity rules in any sport. So hopefully, that's exactly what F1 will get once again. Even if it's only parity means, of course, in F1, a second driver. But that we'll take it. Anybody will take it just because there'll be competition. Because that's, I mean, what's sports without competition? So, one more question, and that is. My friend, who I've referenced before on these videos, who's a big F1 fan, mentioned something about Andretti and Cadillac.
Yes.
I don't think we talked about that on the preseason show, so I don't know if you were going to talk about it today, but what is that about?
So every so often, Formula One offers tenders to new teams that want to come in and join the series. There's a multi-step process that has to happen in order for that team to be vetted, and ultimately it comes down to a decision as to whether or not it's good for the sport. Last thing they want to do is have a team join and then fold quickly, leave quickly, whatever. They want to make it additive. So if a team is just going to come in and then force them to split their prize money one extra team, nobody's going to go for that. So you have to present a business case to get into Formula One that is additive to the sport. So by you joining and bringing your team to Formula One, somehow, some way, you are attracting more money to the sport, and therefore more prize money. The entire pie gets bigger, and everybody benefits from you joining. So the bar to get into Formula One is extremely high. You can't just go out and buy a charter like you can in NASCAR. Not that charters are easy to get or inexpensive, but it's not the same process. There was a tender that was opened. I think there were 3 or 4 applicants, if I'm not mistaken. 2 of them ended up being serious and moving onward. Andretti was the one that went the furthest, and they actually went all the way to the last step. A lot of why the Andretti bid was enticing was, number one, because you've got a giant fan base here in the United States, and Michael Andretti is a former Formula One driver. He didn't have the greatest success, but obviously he carries the name. His father certainly carries the name. So to have Andretti join Formula One in and of itself is probably a good thing. Obviously very successful as a driver, obviously extremely successful as a team owner. And then on top of that, he had the ability to attract Cadillac. General Motors, not in Formula One for quite a long time. There are just a few engine manufacturers and those that are interested in investing the time, money, resources, personnel to develop an engine. As I said, these teams and these engine manufacturers design and build everything themselves. There's not a whole heck of a lot of customer. There's more now than there used to be, but there's not a whole heck of a lot of customer supply out there. So Cadillac was willing to come in. They backed the entry, went all the way to the final vote. I believe it was the final step, and ultimately ended up being rejected. And unfortunately, like I was hoping that it would happen. It's the furthest in a long time that any new team has gotten along the path to Formula One. I know Penske talked about it briefly. I think there have been rumors from time to time about Ganassi as well. And I think Andretti probably had the best chance. I think the problem may be that the current rule book it still has at least another year to go unless they end up extending it. So there's going to be a whole new redraft of rules, which will affect the engines, which will affect the chassis, the build, and so on and so forth. And I think with the way that it is now being this late in this set of rules, I think that was probably detrimental and probably just poor timing. So if I had my crystal ball, I'm tainted because I want them in the sport.
Sure.
In the series. But if I had my crystal ball, I'd probably say give them another year. Next time the tender opens, next time the rule book is rewritten here in the next couple of years, next couple of seasons, I think we're going to see an Andretti car on the grid with a Cadillac power plant.
So it's as simple as there's was there any animosity? I mean, I'm sure they're disappointed, but was it anything more than that? Like, were there
There was some animosity. Yeah. Andretti published it was a little while ago. So some of the particulars that made me laugh, I have slipped my memory at this point, but there was a good, I want to say 2 to 3 page, maybe even longer rebuttal as to his or their point of view as to why they didn't get accepted. The FIA, Formula One release was pretty matter of fact, pretty simple and straightforward. But then a couple of days later, maybe even the next day, Andretti released a good couple-page dissertation as to their perspective of why they should be and why they weren't. I don't think that that's anything more than, hey, we jumped through all your hoops, we got to the last finish line, and then you guys tripped us. I think if and when, let's just say when the door is opened again, I have a feeling they're going to be there. I don't think that's
so. It's nothing personal.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And like you said, it's just that there's certain rules that they apparently just can't break. They can't cross that line.
I think it came down to money. Like,
oh, really? Okay.
I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know that immediately bringing in Andretti and Cadillac at this point in the rules session, rule book, when a big rule change is on the horizon, I don't think the rest of the teams that are currently there saw the additive benefit monetarily of bringing them out. Whereas when the rules reset, I think there'll be a bigger opportunity, a bigger business benefit of allowing them, and they're going to see their pie not shrinking. They'll see it as additive, and I think that's why Andretti, give it another year or two, they'll be on the grid.
All right. Well, that's it for me. what do you get? So, in case anybody hasn't seen our videos and we're not a part of your coverage last year, what are you going to provide the viewers each week with?
So every week we're going to say exactly how many laps, I guess, Max Verstappen is going to dominate and win the race by. No, just kidding. We'll talk. We'll talk through
We
the,
hope
the
not.
we'll talk through the race that's coming up. We'll talk through certainly Max Verstappen's going to be the favorite. He is early. That may change as we get on track here and as we move through the season. But we'll talk through some of the storylines that build up to each week. We'll talk about that race week in particular, recap of the prior race and what that means for the coming week. We'll go through some of the odds, and we'll talk through probably the top two or three drivers that might be able to challenge Verstappen on any good week. Hopefully that's more frequently than it was last season, but we'll give you some detail behind the stats that will be posted up on the screen that help you get under the numbers a little bit more and maybe give you some insights to be able to potentially make some money here. I know it's very hard when you've got one driver that consistently wins everything to be able to make any money on that, but we'll hopefully give you some options and some insights as the season goes along to be able to help you out there.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up now so you can reference it at any time during the video, and that is I'm going to put up the DraftKings, the odds for both the futures to win the championship, which right now are at minus 650 for Max, and the odds to win the race this week. So let's see. Yeah, there's. I'm just going to go ahead and post that up there. Let's see. There it is. So there you go. So anytime you want to reference those, just let me know, and I will. I'm here to make this as easy as possible for you, CJ. So enjoy the coverage this week and the whole season, and hopefully, hopefully it'll be more competitive this year.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I'm going to reference the odds straight off the bat. So Max Verstappen, clearly early favorite. He had very strong testing, therefore he's the favorite. He won so many races last year. However, odds for Formula One typically change drastically once the cars hit the track, and they hit the track tomorrow. As I said, this is going to be a Saturday race for those of us on or in the United States. Versus Sunday, Saturday race all over the world, actually. But it's tomorrow is when we start getting a real feel for where the competition actually stacks out. So Verstappen's odds, they're probably going to stick where they are. But if you look at second in line, Charles Leclerc, if Ferrari is closer to Red Bull than these odds are giving them credit for, and if you're somebody that wants to right off the bat not go with what has been the sure thing recently, at least through 2023, in Red Bull and Max Verstappen, probably going to want to take a look at Charles Leclerc. And in fact, if you look at the constructors odds, it's kind of hard right now, actually, since we haven't had any track time other than testing, which is, hazy for all sorts of reasons. You might find it difficult to choose between the two Ferrari drivers as to who best is going to challenge Verstappen and honestly Perez in the Red Bull. I do think Ferrari is closest, but I could probably flip a coin between Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. There are a couple storylines that we'll get into here specifically for Sainz, but if you look at the constructors, if you want to take the contrary bet prior to cars hitting the track and you think that Ferrari is going to be a little bit closer to Red Bull than they were last year, you're probably going to want to get them now. I think if they end up being closer in practice, possibly getting the pole or front row starts, if Leclerc and Sainz are both up there, I think the Ferrari grouping as a team, as a constructor, is the way to go. Probably want to go for them as a podium. The odds aren't going to be as good as an outright win, certainly, but they're going to be better than Verstappen and Red Bull. So that's where we are. We're at the first race of 2024. Can't wait to get it underway, and we are at Bahrain. This is the 20th year that Bahrain will be hosting a race. So it started in 2024. There actually have been 20 races at the track, 20 Formula One races, because they ended up doing 2 in 2020 for the COVID years. But this is a track that has been around for quite a long time on the schedule, and it's a track that the teams know really well. It's also the track that the teams did their testing at just last weekend. So we do have some early insights into what's going to be happening. So long story short, Red Bull still appear to have the upper hand. I know you wanted to hear something different. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. Red Bull had a very impressive test. They unloaded pretty quickly and got right to business and did a ton of laps. Um, the only team that I've heard the word impressed from the testing form has been about Red Bull. So Red Bull is looking like the early favorite. Max Verstappen certainly is going to take advantage of that. He's going to be the one to beat this weekend. But there is some indication that Ferrari, as I mentioned, have made up some ground. I do think that given the testing results, Ferrari does look like they're second fastest. The question is, when we actually get to a race weekend, when you have practice qualifying, most importantly, and then ultimately the race, I do wonder how close Ferrari actually is. I don't think they still have some distance to go to catch Red Bull. There's no question about that. But if they're significantly closer, they can challenge for race wins. And that's a really good place for them to be, considering, as I said, that Hamilton ended up running away from Charles Leclerc in the championship behind the two Red Bulls. So that is good news for Ferrari. I think Ferrari is probably going to be your best second bet here for Bahrain. And we'll see exactly how much they actually close the gap to Red Bull once the cars hit the track. As far as Mercedes go, Mercedes did have some problems with their car in 2023. Lewis Hamilton, as he typically does, got the best out of it, and he actually had a really good result in the championship as a result of that. But we know that given their prior domination that they want to win, and we know that Hamilton wants to win, and there's nothing that they will do not to win. So they have been hard at work. They do have a completely new car, though, so that while they do seem content with that, so the car unloaded pretty well. There were some good positive results for them from the early testing. It does incorporate a new philosophy for them, which means they have a learning curve to go. So I do think that they will be expected to grow as that development continues throughout the season. So I do think by the end of the year, I think Mercedes will certainly be significantly stronger than they start the season. So perhaps you might want to take a slightly lower expectation of Hamilton and Mercedes right from the get-go, at least until the series and the schedule gets back to Europe, when they can start delivering their new parts and start really developing their new chassis as the season goes on. So right now, Red Bull, Ferrari second. Take a little bit of a lower expectation on Mercedes, and I think that's where your running order is. A team that we talked about a lot in 2023, though, was Lando Norris and the McLaren team. Honestly, after testing, I feel like McLaren's really an unknown. They didn't have flashy session times. They did have some teething problems, no question about that. That could suggest that they may suffer some early reliability concerns. So whether that means they actually retire from a race or they have to approach the race more conservatively until they get those problems figured out, we don't know. When I say conservatively approach a race, that means slower. So I don't think that we're going to see McLaren, Lando Norris, etc., doing as well up at the front as they did last year. You'll remember last year they were fighting for some poles, possibly could have been the long shots for the wins at certain tracks, etc., etc. I just don't think that they're there for the beginning of the season. So we got a little ways to go with them. Certainly going to be further behind than a Mercedes, a Ferrari, and definitely the Red Bull. That brings us to the midfield, and this is where all the action, this is where the real competitiveness actually is, when you got Verstappen and Red Bull running away from everyone. So I think further back, Alpine, however you want to pronounce it, they've got problems. Right from the launch of their car, they were trying to play down expectations, and that quite honestly was backed up by the testing times. They did not show anything impressive. Definitely, I would avoid them early if possible. Hopefully, they can figure out what to do to make their car perform a little bit better, make it work more. They were ones that from time to time in 2023 could actually spring a surprise. This year, certainly out of the gate, definitely doesn't look like it's going to be possible. Another one to look out for is actually Haas. Haas they are an American team. So we were talking about Andretti earlier. It's nice to mention that we do have Haas, an American team that's there. They are predominantly customer based, so they don't do a whole heck of a lot of their own design and all that good stuff. They tend to buy their parts and their engines, so on and so forth. But they actually had a decent test. The speed, I think, is there. So they underperformed in 2023 without question. And they definitely want to move further up the order. And they'd had some impressive seasons prior to that. But heading into 2024, despite the fact that the car is faster, one story to watch out for them, and I think this is going to impact them more as the season goes on, is that they lost two major players over the winter, Gunther Steiner and Simone Resta. They both left the team. Those were key figures in getting the team to where they were. Granted, 2023 was an underperformance, but are they going to be able to reach those same heights through 2024 with the development, with those two gone and completely new faces coming in and taking over? So it's going to be interesting to watch Haas. I think they've got some early speed. They'll probably be a little bit better at the beginning of the season. I don't think these departures will really affect them until later on through the development cycle throughout the season. But Haas might be one that you look at least for Bahrain and maybe the first couple of races to lead the midfield back there. All of this said, with the first race of the year, we just don't know. The first race of the year is always high for attrition. You tend to, with the new cars, new parts, etc., you tend to have reliability issues that don't manifest themselves later on in the year when the teams figure out the problems. So I think there will be some attrition. I think we will see some surprises, no question. But the fact of the matter is, we just don't know the true pecking order until the cars hit the track. First time they hit the track is going to be Friday morning, or Thursday morning, I should say. I'm sorry, I'm already back on the normal schedule. But they'll hit the track Thursday morning. And even then, just because it's practice, some people are going to be hedging, some teams are not going to be hedging. Some will be focusing on qualifying pace, others will be working through the race pace. So you just really don't know, quite honestly, until qualifying. And that's going to be on Friday for this race. However, if you're going to go with one of the long shots, like a Ferrari, like a Leclerc, like a Sainz, etc., make sure you grab those odds now, because I do think that they are going to hit the track fast. And I think regardless of practice times and regardless of the fact that you really don't know until qualifying hits, I think you're going to see that Red Bull and Ferrari seem to have the edge on the field. So that is the preview for Bahrain. So what about some other storylines that we will be looking at least for the early season? Certainly, as I mentioned, how close is everyone to Red Bull? Red Bull had a record season. Verstappen had a record season in 2023, his third straight championship. How close is everybody going to be able to close that gap? Ferrari definitely looks like they closed the gap. The question is just how much. Is it going to be another runaway? We'll see. Hopefully, it is going to be more competitive. Story number two. At Red Bull, we stay there. Christian Horner. Those of you following the tabloids, this was an interesting story over the winter. We know that Christian Horner, behind Max Verstappen, this team sport, Christian Horner is the team principal for Red Bull. He is a very large reason why that team is where it is. During the offseason, there were some allegations, and they're confidential, etc. We don't really know what happened, but there were some allegations that there was some inappropriate controlling behavior, to use the quotes from Christian Horner, toward a Red Bull employee. We didn't know when we did our preview show, and that's linked there. You can look at it. At the time, we didn't know that investigation was ongoing. We didn't know what the result was going to be. It actually just came out. Christian Horner was cleared of any wrongdoing. So despite the fact that he was accused, despite the fact that Red Bull brought in an independent investigator to look through all of the materials, the final report shows that Christian Horner was not in the wrong. So he is still there. He'll be at the track this weekend. He intends to be there throughout. He was there for testing. My question is, though, as an employee, if you're wrongfully accused and you're put through that rigmarole, and your life is played out through the tabloids with all speculation and all that good kind of stuff, do you really want to stay? If he chooses to go, I think that's going to be a massive problem for Red Bull. He's basically the CEO of that race team. He was a big part of why they got to where they are and why they had such a dominant season. Obviously, the guy behind the wheel is a big part of that as well. But you got to have the right organization behind you, and that is Christian Horner's excellence. That's what he brought to the team. So follow that story. See if he's content to stick with Red Bull, stick it throughout the season, stay there, continuing developing, etc. It was definitely an off-track annoyance or distraction that Red Bull, Christian Horner, Max Verstappen, everybody involved in that organization should not have been dealing with when they should have been focusing on their car. So we'll see how that plays out. And then finally, the biggest news probably of the offseason was the announcement of Lewis Hamilton leaving Ferrari, or leaving Mercedes for Ferrari rather. For the first time in his career, he's not going to be in a Mercedes starting next season. So this is his last season with Mercedes. Big questions as to how that plays out. You know, he said he wants to win. He always wants to win. He is a champion. He is a great driver. Question remains, though, if he's going to a rival, a fierce competitor in Ferrari, does he get the best equipment in 24? Does that all shift to George Russell, his teammate? Does Russell become the top driver now? Does Hamilton get kind of closed into the dark in terms of the car development? Certainly he's been there long enough that he's got a lot of secrets that he knows that he's going to be taking to Ferrari, but anything that's development for the future, Mercedes isn't going to want to watch that walk across the paddock to Ferrari. So it's going to be interesting just to see how Hamilton and Mercedes leverage this last year together as they go through 2024 before Hamilton heads over to Ferrari. Then obviously when we get to 2025, we'll start talking more about what Hamilton can actually do for Ferrari. It's going to be interesting as well. You know, Carlos Sainz is the odd man out. Leclerc is staying there. He's got a multi-year deal at Ferrari. Carlos Sainz said in interviews already this week that there's no animosity, no hard feelings for Hamilton taking his seat, but that gives Sainz something to prove. Certainly, he's got maybe the best car he's got or has had with the team this year. So it'll be interesting to see if he drives any better, achieves any more success now that he's got a little bit of chip on his shoulder and something to prove. So those are all the storylines that we are looking out for early 2024. As I said, the Bahrain Grand Prix, first race of the 2024 season, kicks off with practice on Thursday. We'll have qualifying on Friday and then the race on Saturday. So again, just to recap, it looks like Red Bull, Max Verstappen are going to be your favorites. If you're looking for somewhere else to go other than those and maybe attract a little bit better odds, you're going to want to look at Leclerc. You're going to want to look at Perez. You're going to want to look at Carlos Sainz. My recommendation, though, would be to take the Ferrari team as a constructor, because that way you get both Leclerc and Sainz, and they're looking right now, at least early until the cars hit the track, like the ones that would be best poised to be able to challenge Red Bull. So with that, we will wrap up this intro to the 2024 season and the Gulf Air Bahrain Grand Prix. And we will be back again in another week for Abu Dhabi. And I am CJ Radoon of rotowire.com, here for Mystery Caution. And don't forget to subscribe. You'll never miss any of the motorsports videos all season long. We got NASCAR, enhanced IndyCar coverage for this year, and of course Formula One, which you're here for. You can always access my columns by clicking the link in the description of the video below. And feel free to let me know what is on your mind. I'll answer your questions as we go through this season each week. And until next time, keep it out of the fence.